What's going on, guys? We're starting our second season here. Episode 1. We really don't have much of a structure set in place, but we're going to try and go with a seasonal structure, hopefully to WrestleMania, and then kind of reset from there. We just did our WrestleMania shows, so if you haven't seen that, check it out. I'm assuming most of you who are listening to this, if you are, have seen WrestleMania by now. And right now,
I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, like, how could you not have seen this? I think this was one of the better WrestleManias of the year, and we talked a good deal about it a couple weeks ago. I think it was 2 weeks ago we did it. But with the fallout from that, it's interesting because you have so much momentum coming off of this WrestleMania that, like, you would expect the next few shows to be really good, and I think the first couple of shows were. I think Raw and SmackDown the week after were pretty good overall, but I think that the decline has been just absolutely ridiculous from then.
Fast,
I mean,
hard fall.
Just look at the crowd from Raw San Jose right after WrestleMania, and you kind of saw the WWE Universe come out, full swing saying, all right, we're finally going to get behind and be a little bit more vocal. And they've been, sporadically vocal, but that was like a harassment show for a lot of the talent, and it really kind of set a tone for what we expect from them moving forward.
Right. I mean, you think about how many things went down during WrestleMania and how many possibilities they have. Like, even guys that lost have, like, the potential to be in these feuds, and so many guys were up in the air that, like, they could really put a lot of things together, and none of it's really culminated yet, so we're really confused, especially after this week's episode. So anyway, I'm going to introduce everybody that's on the panel, because we're really the only three that have been showing up lately, so we're going to keep rolling with this as we move into Season 2. I'm Seth Skinner.
I'm Bill Hairsign.
And I am Tim LeMay.
Via Skype, we usually try and get him via Skype, and we're getting better and better at using this whole digital tech, I guess you can call it.
This goddamn internet computer.
So, ultimately, like, Raw this week, I thought was just, like, an absolute mindfuck. I mean, like, pardon my French, but goddamn. Like, seriously, it was the most confusing Raw I've seen in a long time. I think one of the episodes not too long ago was after one of the pay-per-views where we were pretty much, like, just dumbfounded by the way Raw went. And this one, I think, trumped it.
Oh, yeah, this was like... They like to say if you're not in the business, you don't understand what goes on in it, but this is really one of the episodes of Raw that made you think that I could book a better show than this.
Mm-hmm.
I think looking at it from this was their first of a twice-a-year foray into the European market, and looking at it from, say, you were in the London show watching it there, I think you got one heck of a show setup-wise. Other than that, like, if you're looking at it from a storyline perspective of, we just walked out of WrestleMania, we have 5 weeks to build to Extreme Rules, I don't feel like we came out in any better shape than we did going into it.
And you got to consider mostly the fact that they're, in London. It's hard to get a show like that really is going to work with the storyline. But still, I mean, like, it was just really, really broken and, like, unstructured. It kicked off with Cena, who has been doing his open challenge with the U.S. title week after week. Bad News Barrett comes out, and it was interesting because we thought it was going to be... It kicked off the right way, is what I'm trying to say. Because, you don't generally have a match that early on in Raw, and especially with a title on the line. On these weekly shows, you don't have the titles on the line very much nowadays. But Cena goes over, and it was an okay match. And I don't know, I don't really have a lot more to say about it because I think John Cena is going to be, like, holding that title and just kind of elevating it for a little while, bringing attention to it.
Yeah. And like you said, I feel like it was for once we got a Raw that starts off with a match. It's a match with something on the line, actually, like we've been saying for a long time, and I feel like they really just squandered it with the way the match was set up. I mean, in ring, technically, it was a pretty good match, but just it's that same style of finish that WWE has been using for all of their clean finishes lately, where one guy hits a finisher or misses the finisher, and then the other guy comes and hits his finisher, and just like that, it's over 1, 2, 3. And they've been doing that so much lately that it's already getting old.
Yeah, we talked about that a little later on Raw tonight. We'll get to that, obviously, but I mean, still, it's like, really, there's not a lot to get to on this show because, like, there's so many matches that really just, like, the pairing didn't make a lot of sense. I guess maybe they just wanted to show certain people overseas or whatever, but to me, I just thought the pairing overall was really just kind of fucked.
It was weird because obviously they went for the Homer having Bad News Barrett, who is a UK local, going against John Cena for the title. But when you look at it as an overall spectrum, Bad News Barrett is still very much in the Intercontinental title realm, so him going for a different title just doesn't make sense. It's like Ambrose the night after WrestleMania going for the title. He's so deeply involved with the other one that all of a sudden it's just a random pairing when you could have used somebody like Sheamus, who lost that title to Rusev, have him come out, be the local, be the heel, be the angry guy, and put on a good match with John Cena. But they didn't go that way, and that was super frustrating, and it really took away from what was a good match overall.
Yeah, I thought that was the biggest thing, is that the fact that Barrett is really in that Intercontinental picture, to thrust him into that match is kind of like taking away from it. You know that Cena's going to come out on top. It's just kind of unnecessary, in my opinion.
And that's the problem I've had with these open challenges, is everyone who's been answering this open challenge has been someone taken right out of that Intercontinental title scene. And it's really just more of the WWE filler style. Just take everyone out of a certain feud, inject them into another one, so you don't actually have to book anything creative.
You make the storyline for the title about the title and not so much about the two guys hating each other, which is really what makes something fun to watch from a creative standpoint.
Yeah. And it's always like, I feel like Barrett is like in a weird spot because they put him in the title picture, but they don't seem to do a lot with him that they could be doing. And that's the position that everybody's in at this point. I think there's so many guys on this roster, and we've said it before, and I mean, I'll keep saying it every time I'm on here. There's so many guys, and the roster is deep, but they're just so ridiculously underutilized.
In terms of in-ring skill, this is probably one of the most talented rosters they've ever had, that really have a complete package. If anything, they might be lacking a few mic workers, but overall, this is about as talented a roster as you're ever going to find, and just the way they're squandering it is almost criminal, really.
Yeah.
And the overall problem is, Bill, exactly like you say, they're very weak on having guys who can go out there, grab the mic, and deliver like an astounding promo. But the guys that they do have, few and far between, are doing absolutely nothing to try and, change that for the better.
And you got to think about the fact that they can always throw in managers if they have to. I mean, if need be, there are people that are there that have mic skills and that aren't being utilized.
Yeah.
Paul Heyman.
Yeah, and he really isn't being used very much because he's got, he's with a guy that's out all the time, that's on the bench, half of the year.
Yeah.
And they've already said Brock's not coming back until SummerSlam, so give us something to do for 4 months.
Yeah.
And then you've got other managers like Lana. She's been MIA for the past couple weeks. She just came back tonight, pretty much. You've had Zeb Coulter, who Rusev put him out of commission, and they haven't wanted to do a thing with Jack Swagger, so Zeb's been out of the picture, too.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, since Heath Slater came back from his incident, you haven't seen him at all.
All right, so we'll move on through this, like, whatever the hell this was, this, like, clusterfuck of matches. Paige.
We had the Yeah, Paige won the Battle Royal, which made sense based on the fact that she's from England, but it kind of ruined the Naomi push they've had for the last couple of weeks.
And I think the whole Naomi it came down to Paige and Naomi, and Paige wins. Naomi basically almost, I think it's a heel turn in a sense, because she did attack her after the match. That's generally a sign of that kind of thing. But I think the match went by really quick because, if you're trying to fill this 3 hours, you have time for them to have a match. It really came down to 4 divas before, anything was even established. Really the first, how many were in it initially? 8?
Yeah.
And the first 4 were just gone, like instantly almost.
Not to mention they had Rosa Mendez had the first 2 eliminations, and no one knows who she is anymore.
Right.
She can't wrestle to save her life either.
And that's not what she's there for. She's there to be a Fandango arm candy, but I'm sure we'll get to that quickly, or in a little bit.
I just think it was, I don't know. I feel like they just could have dragged it out a little bit more, and there was no reason, like you said, to have that elimination happen. And the roster in the Divas division isn't as big as it should be. They should be calling up some of these NXT divas as well.
And they will be in the next month or so, I believe.
Yeah, and they really should be at this point. Like, we talked about that as well. Like, the reason the show's stale is because they're still not bringing up people from NXT. And I think they can fill those voids in NXT if they have to.
I don't even know about, they have the 8 divas in the Battle Royal. You have both Bella Twins. You have Eva Marie, who's in limbo somewhere. Apparently, she's actually been training with Brian Kendrick down in NXT. She's actually looking like she's improving a little bit. But
Eva Marie had a legitimate injury, and then to not break kayfabe or whatever they want to say, she had to get those changed out, but she had to recover from the surgery. But she is getting the training with Brian Kendrick, so she'll probably come back and split a few heads open.
Yeah, and the thing is, they have a decent number of divas on the roster, but they only have a precious few that can actually work. And that's why I wonder why they've been so slow calling up the divas from NXT, really.
Mm-hmm. I think Charlotte is ready, and even Sasha Banks is ready, but
because when we watch it, they have like Becky Lynch, Sasha Banks, Charlotte, Alexa Bliss. Like, if you take Charlotte and Sasha Banks or whoever and bring them up to the main roster, then you're down to only 2 there. And to be fair, that's the better Divas division to watch.
Oh yeah, easily, definitely. The thing about it is you got, like, even Bayley. That's funny. We're watching WWE Network. Cena's hat just fell off trying to get in the ring. It's not a good idea to have a television on muted in the background. All right. So anyway, next was the Lucha Dragons and the Ascension, and I still don't know how the Lucha Dragons gimmick got over more than the New Day, and I mentioned that during the show, and I don't understand. It's just as gay, realistically.
I guess it is easier to chant, but that's about all it has on the New Day thing, really.
And the New Day's kind of transforming into a heel because of the way the crowd's been reacting. So, but I think the Lucha Dragons are going to go over relatively well because the tag division right now is relatively shallow.
Yeah.
I think the growing response outside of WWE, especially with the growing, presence of Lucha Underground, where you're kind of getting re-exposed to the Mexican high flyers kind of wrestling. I think the Lucha Underground is the best bridge between the two, and people are just wow, look at these guys with their aerial skills, and they're not just one guy bruising into the other and then tagging in his partner for the pinfall.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting too to see the Ascension really isn't going anywhere. They're kind of in that uncomfortable spot where they're not getting a push. They're just kind of there to be another tag team. And I think the guys that are coming up from NXT are those high flying types. Because you see Neville was in that well, I guess I would call it a main event tonight because there wasn't really a main event. But you got to consider the fact that Neville only showed up, a couple weeks ago, and he's basically in a main event on Raw.
Going back to the Lucha Dragons match itself, the match was essentially a squash, little more than that. And I have to wonder why you would book the Lucha Dragons in a match like that, since the entire purpose of getting the Lucha Dragons on the main roster was really to show Kalisto's skills and his moveset and get him over. And a squash match does little to nothing to accomplish that.
Right.
But Kalisto gave birth.
Well, doing what Neville did tonight is what makes you look good on the roster while taking a loss. We'll talk about that later, but Sin Cara's had experience on the main roster, so it's good to have him paired with someone like that who does have the experience. Yeah. All right, so then we had Reigns and Big Show, which I thought was kind of like hilarious because why, like I said, after WrestleMania, you have this momentum for Reigns. He didn't look bad in this Lesnar match, and now you're going to put him with the Big Show in a possible feud.
The best part about this was Roman Reigns on the mic saying he was going to make the Big Show retire. I think that's like his pop to go forwards.
I just was really kind of confused by the way they set that up. You can't tell me that there isn't someone else that could be in a feud with the Big Show at this point. Basically what happens is the Big Show attacks Reigns on his way up the ramp and choke slams him on the taxi cab or whatever the hell it was. And that was it. That was the end of the segment. And I think it is going to lead into a feud, which I don't agree with.
But my problem overall is Oh, go ahead, Bill.
This really is going to be a god-awful feud between Roman Reigns and Big Show. I mean, we've already seen most of it leading up to WrestleMania, and Big Show is no longer good enough of a worker to make Reigns look good. And Reigns is too sloppy still to make a match between him and Big Show look good. It's really the least optimal pairing that you could have gotten in the roster, really.
I literally can't stress how bad Big Show has become over the past couple years. Like he can't move anywhere near as fast as he could. He can't sell moves like he could. I mean, it just looks bad when he's in the ring. And it's kind of disgusting to have him in a feud with a guy that they're trying to push as a top baby face.
I think as Roman Reigns maybe jokingly alluded to, unless this is like a retirement feud for the Big Show, then this feud has really no merit. But looking forward, it's like what I've been saying for the past couple weeks since Sheamus has been returning. There are so many feuds that would look better if Sheamus were the heel that was a part of it. Here you have Roman Reigns fresh out of the main event scene, not really with anywhere to go, trying to prove his strength, and then all of a sudden you have the Celtic Warrior come back, who is again in the future, and he's trying to get his grounds back as the big bad guy. Have him go against Reigns, have them battle it out, slug it out for a couple weeks, show that they can both be the powerhouse bruisers. That would elevate both of them into, just on the fringe of the main event scene. Stop throwing the Big Show into places where we've seen him for the past 10, 15 years, and you know what, it just gets tiring because he has slowed down, and it's no fun to watch anymore because we can't buy into it.
I just think it's funny that he's still at the top, considering how not fucking good in the ring he is. So my note was Reigns / Big Show stupidity. That's all I put. And that's all I really needed to say about that.
Yeah, and that really comes back to the fact that if you're going to have Big Show where he is on the card, you might as well. I mean, he is getting older. The logical thing to do would be to use him to put over new stars, but they really don't do that at all. Big Show consistently goes over the younger guys, and he's not even that much of a novelty anymore where you can look strong in losing to him. And it's just the worst possible things they could do with him, they do with him consistently.
Mm-hmm. Like, Vince McMahon, if you are going to put over Big Show, you're fucked. Like, I'm sorry. He is way too old for that. Like, like Bill said, he needs to be a guy that puts people over. And he can do that because he has the credibility. He's been there for long enough. He's built the profile to the point where he can put guys over in a strong fashion. And he doesn't do it.
I want to see him put over Hideo Itami or Finn Balor when they first come over.
Yeah. And that shouldn't take too long either, really. Especially Hideo, since we saw him at Mania in the Battle Royal or whatever the hell it was.
I'm hearing Finn Balor will cross over shortly after Extreme Rules, and Hideo Itami will follow, I think, the pay-per-view after that. I think he might be in some kind of entrance match for Money in the Bank.
I can see more people coming up from NXT because they have a lot of people on NXT, and they seem like they aren't using everybody. Because NXT isn't a long show, and it's hard to fit everybody in there, so when you do have young talent, it's time to push those veterans, the NXT veterans.
Rest in pepperonis to CJ Parker.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think is good for him because he's like only 25, and the way he was wrestling on NXT, you'd think he was like 30, so it's good for him to go back to the indies and try to get some of that fighting spirit back.
Yep. And actually, just this weekend, CJ Parker was on a CZW card, the best of the best tournament, and he actually turned in a couple of really good matches and did some really good heel work over there, and I was really impressed with his performance.
Yeah, there's a couple interviews that are out based on his departure, and if anybody's a fan of, independent wrestling or NXT, they should definitely check those out, where he definitely hits on the fact that he started at NXT when it was FCW, and he watched that brand evolve, and he realized that he wasn't going to be a part of that main event push that you see from the guys like Rollins, Reigns, Ambrose, Balor, Zayn, Owens. So he decided he wanted to go to the indies where all those guys got their fame and then try to see what he can do, because he's still young.
Yeah, and branching off that, I want to mention that I think the show is this season we're gonna try and go a little bit more off of the WWE topic. I'm gonna start watching a little bit more TNA, watching Lucha Underground a little bit more, because I have the WWE network.
So good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I have the network, so the thing about it is Lucha and NXT are on at the same time, on at the same night. So if I do miss NXT, I can just watch it on the network afterwards.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're going to try and branch out as much as we can into...
I just want to say, their caliber of matches for such a thin roster comparatively is just astounding. And the story backline fits so well.
I've only really watched a couple of matches. They post matches on Facebook and on their YouTube and things like that. So what I have seen of Lucha is limited, but what I have seen is good. So I have no reason not to start watching it, and we definitely should start talking about it as well.
I've said it before on this program, but I cannot recommend Lucha Underground strongly enough. The storylines, the in-ring work, they're all
atmosphere too
leagues above almost any other promotion going today.
And I always like the more intimate shows where you really can get a feel for the crowd. Yeah. Sometimes in these big arenas, it's really hard to get a feel for what the crowd's thinking. And with shows like NXT and Lucha Underground, it's really a more compact audience. And especially with NXT, because they're always in the same place. So you get that fan base that really knows what they're fucking doing there.
I will say before we get too far off tangent, because I know we want to get back to Raw, Lucha Underground did what almost any other promotion that I've seen that isn't able to do. Lucha did very well, which was create a doubles and triples realm of wrestling, which is what they call their trios division, and they made that almost more competitive and more fun to watch than their singles competition. Just the storylines based on how they create their teams and their pairings and their matches is just astounding. Dario Cueto beats Vince McMahon any day of the week.
Oh, yes.
Well, especially after tonight. I mean, it's hilarious to even compare it right now.
Yeah, I have our Twitter feed up, which anybody listening can follow at twitter.com/S Circle Podcast, where we post all the results to, at least at this point, all the WWE stuff that we watch live or live to air. So that's kind of how we're following back the Raw that we just watched.
Yeah, and we try to do it while we're watching. We don't want to, we try not to give spoilers or anything like that. Maybe on our Facebook we'll give spoilers once in a while, but we try and keep it pretty much on the DL until it does air. At least in our area.
Yeah. Which is why we try to keep it to the three main shows of Raw, NXT, and SmackDown, because those all air at specific times every week and we can catch them regularly.
So yeah, follow us on Twitter because we have a lot of fun doing that, and we are relatively consistent on that. And also on Facebook, just search for us, Same Circle Podcast on Facebook. So anyway, we'll head back to Raw.
Which is Orton against Cesaro.
Yeah, and I thought this was really confusing because of the way it ended and restarted. Basically, Kid and Orton end up on the outside. I think Cesaro and Orton were the legal men. It was a handicap match, and basically Orton attacks Tyson Kidd and somehow wins by disqualification. I didn't understand how that worked.
Yeah.
It was because it originally started as Orton against Cesaro, so Kid wasn't a legal man at all. So the second that the referee saw Kid interfere, it became an Orton win by disqualification. And that's when Kane made it a 2-on-1 afterwards.
But I don't get it. I mean, if you're on the outside, you're not really interfering. I mean, technically speaking, if Orton comes to the outside and attacks Kid, even if he's on the apron, that's not really a DQ because you're not technically in the match. I guess Orton is in the match, so I don't know. It's kind of a hard thing to understand for me, but
it was a stupid way to do it, but it was a great loophole that they went ahead and took advantage of.
Yeah. So Kane comes out and restarts the match. And eventually Orton wins with an RKO by pinfall. And that was basically it for that.
Which there's not much to say afterwards other than the fact that this match, if Orton were to win, he could pick the stipulation between him and Seth Rollins at Extreme Rules. So you knew he was pretty much going to win because you couldn't imagine him going into Extreme Rules without any kind of control over his match.
I do have to say, I'm not a fan of having one guy, even if it is someone as high up the card as Randy Orton, going over your tag team champions single-handedly, especially when he just got out of a match and had it thrown out, no matter how short it was. It really does nothing to make your champions look any sort of strong.
Right. So my next note...
On to the random match of the week. Oh, no, go ahead.
Well, my next note was Kane says testicles. Something about a car battery.
Yeah, this is one of the most random outbursts I've seen in a WWE promo in some time.
I think it was fun to see Kane kind of lose his sense of stability, because for the last like 2 years, you've seen him be the Authority's lackey. So all of a sudden to see Kane in some kind of distress to where he kind of has to break that connection is just hilarious.
Kane definitely had a little bit of some issues tonight, but we'll get to that also. So Ambrose and Adam Rose.
Woof.
I mean, what? I mean, again, it's just like these guys are thrown together. And who's gonna win from this? I just feel like Adam Rose doesn't go anywhere. So what's the sense of putting a guy like Ambrose that is going? He's almost in the Intercontinental picture, has been, and I mean, that this is gonna be a win for Dean Ambrose. What's the sense of this?
I think when you're looking at it, Adam Rose is a character who needs a reimagining of his gimmick. Sure, he can still be the party animal, but when he started to feud against the Bunny, when we're looking back a couple months ago, we saw a guy who could show his anger. We have not seen that anger since then. We don't know what Adam Rose even has, the motivation to be back out there in the ring at all. And then we move forward to Dean Ambrose. He was one of the top guys in the Intercontinental title picture. He almost beat Cena, this aimless freelance guy out there to bring destruction, but he's had no motivation, no promos to where he says what he's even trying to do. Outside of Sheamus, he's probably one of the top 2 guys with no direction, truly, who can go out there and steal the show at any given point. And you just wasted it by throwing both of them in a match because you had them both there and had nothing else for them to do. It's kind of stupid to watch.
I didn't understand the Bunny thing that happened a while back. Never came to a conclusion either. It just kind of fell off, and I didn't understand that either.
It was supposed to be Darren Young, and then all of a sudden Darren Young disappears and comes back as a primetime player, which now the primetime players look great, but what the hell did we sit through that Bunny stuff? Because as stupid as it was, I really wanted to see an Adam Rose Bunny match just to finish the whole.
Exactly. I thought that it was more of it was a way to reveal somebody coming up. Initially I thought it was going to be somebody from NXT, but it never came to a head.
The Bunny itself during matches was either Justin Gabriel or Sami Zayn, depending on the match overall, but when Justin Gabriel left, the Bunny went with it.
Yeah. Alright, so, again, there's not a lot more to say about it. It was just kind of one of those matches that was thrown in, almost a time buyer. And then we had Stardust and Fandango, which, another one, like, what the hell?
The only saving grace to the Fandango Stardust thing was the fact that Fandango had his moment of addressing the universe and trying to turn his character, not like heel or face turn, but enough to where he tries to become more visible and more open to the universe, which I think is his last saving grace of being a quality character.
Yeah. And the crowd was into it, so, I view it more of a face turn than anything.
Yeah, I would think it would be a bit of a face turn, but at the same time, I have to suspect that it was just a little nod to the UK fans, an acknowledgement of how over just Fandango's theme song was the last time they were in the UK. And so I think they made a nice little nod to that. It remains to be seen if that turns into a full-blown face turn, but I don't have high hopes that they'll follow through with it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say, Bill, I know you watch Lucha Underground quite a bit, right?
Yeah.
When you saw him stand up and start to address what his issue was, and he looked at Eva Mendes, Rosa Mendes, I almost saw like the Eva Lee split from Lucha Underground, and I was like, please don't copy this word for word on the same idea. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, there were major shades of the whole Son of Havoc Evil East thing going on.
Exactly. I thought he was going to get on the table and pull a Son of Havoc and say, my problem isn't me, the problem is that I'm aligned with you, and then go solo.
Yeah. At this point, I'd almost welcome WWE just blatantly ripping off Lucha Underground.
All of a sudden, El Pentagon Jr.'s music hits, and he just comes through and breaks Curtis Axel's arm.
Please. Please have it.
I want that to happen because I love Pentagon Jr. so much.
Yeah, and hell, Curtis Axel can't go much lower anyway, so.
No, he's already ripping off a 30-year-old gimmick, so why the hell not?
Yeah. So then we move on to Kane and Rollins, which was initially supposed to be just Kane kind of laying down, giving Rollins the victory. Kane sort of had a...
It started off as the world's worst strip show.
Yeah. Kane chokeslams Rollins. He basically just kind of... You're kind of seeing the fact where the fans have always wanted Kane to go back to the way he was, the big red machine, but it's never going to happen, I don't think. He's too old for that.
It will happen as he retires.
Yeah. But I think that you were seeing shades of it in a sense that Kane is kind of torn. He doesn't really want to be putting Rollins in that position anymore. He doesn't want to be just that guy. So yeah, he choke slams him, lays down for the pin, and gives Rollins the win ultimately.
I think what we're seeing is we saw Kane, who sat back and he was totally fine helping out Randy Orton because Randy Orton kind of bought into the whole principle. But when you see Seth Rollins, he's coming in as the future of the WWE. He's coming in with his own game plan, and he's trying to change the old guard. And I think Kane is struggling to adapt to that. And with Kane struggling to adapt is when you start to see, maybe he's realizing that his days in the Authority are numbered. And I think we're going to see a Kane face turn, and that's probably going to round him out just kind of like the Big Show.
Yeah. The more I think about it, I was not high on this segment when I first saw it, but the more I think about it, I think I'm starting to warm up to it. I mean, it gives a whole lot of different directions that you could take with Kane's character. You got the face turn against Seth Rollins being teased, and then they had the segment a little bit later where Daniel Bryan confronted him about laying down for Seth Rollins, and it seemed like they might have been teasing a Hell No reunion. And then, even just in the execution
Team
of the...
Hell maybe.
Yeah. And then even just in the execution of the segment with Kane going back and forth between whether he was going to lay down or go after Rollins, he just had the crowd eating out of the palm of his hand, really. I was actually pretty impressed with Kane's performance in this.
And the thing is, if you're going to see either Kane or Big Show go face, you would much rather see Kane, and as far as I'm concerned.
I want to see a situation where the Authority loses Kane, loses the Big Show, and they're stuck having to reimagine their stranglehold over the WWE with their only main controller being Seth Rollins. Because I think that shows a weakening of the Authority, and that allows the rest of the roster to usurp the whole idea and kind of regain the organization for the fans.
So we move on to Mizdow and Miz, who have been going back and forth for the last couple of weeks. Really, surprisingly enough, the biggest event that happened in that feud was on SmackDown last week, I believe. And then this week, Mizdow goes over, which is nice. You got Summer Rae sort of on his side. And, I mean, I think they're just milking it to the point where, Mizdow's really as over as you can get, I think. But they're kind of milking it more than they should, in my opinion. But that's just how I'm seeing it.
I mean, it's well documented that a house show is to help the evolution of what they show live on television. And from what I've been seeing in the house shows, the Miz vs. Mizdow stuff has had Mizdow come out with a character which very much resembles his You're Welcome Damien Sandow character. And I think they're going to harness that moving forward based on the promos that I've seen him cut in the other house shows when they're in the UK. I think he's going to turn that on the Miz, and we're going to get a reemergence of Damien Sandow. I almost think that's going to come out of a match at Extreme Rules, even though that card is filling up faster than anybody can say. But I feel like we're going to get a reemergence of the Damien Sandow character and no longer a Mizdow twin.
Yeah,
it's about time for that, honestly.
Yeah, and if it doesn't happen at Extreme Rules, I'll be surprised, because how long can you keep dragging it out? I mean, there's only so many segments you can really do between these two that are really, pushing it anywhere. All right, so Ryback versus Harper.
Another filler match of relative garbage.
Mm-hmm. It was basically there for Ambrose interference.
It showed Ambrose coming against Luke Harper. They had Dean Ambrose come out, run interference against Luke Harper, which makes sense when you look back at the WrestleMania moment of Harper putting him through a ladder. But the overall issue is they buried that moment for 2 weeks, so all of a sudden we're coming back to it, and it's almost like a deep memory we have to pull back out when they could have capitalized on it almost immediately, and they had the Ambrose scene. You kind of killed that moment.
I feel like they didn't bring it to light as much as they should have, in a sense, because it was a way that they really put Ambrose out of that match. And they never really, like you said, they never really brought it up. And now they're kind of trying to, stir the pot and bring it back up. And in a sense,
And that's part of my anger. It's part of my anger because I love the Ambrose character and they just have no direction for it at the moment. They have no one for him to hate, no one for him to go up against. So watching it now is just kind of like, well, where was this anger 2 weeks ago? We could have used this.
So then we move on to what I consider the main event. It was Dolph Ziggler comes in the ring. Basically, you don't know who he's gonna have a match with. Ends up being Neville, and I thought this was a really good match. Adrian Neville has looked really good, and the thing about it is he can look really, really good in the ring and still suffer a loss and still, be over with the crowd because of the way his moveset is.
But the problem is you have Adrian just based on the way his character is garnering a reaction. And you have him go against Dolph Ziggler, who's an over-the-top face, so you have no idea why he's coming out other than the fact that it was a Dolph Ziggler challenge. But Dolph Ziggler doesn't really have a reason to have an open challenge.
Yeah. It's nice to see Neville against guys like Ziggler, who are at the top of the card in WWE. Because it shows me that they have faith in him, and it shows me that they want to give him a decent push early, which could be either a good thing or a bad thing. But I think in his case, I think it's going to be a good thing because, how does he not go over? I think he hasn't had to talk much, and I don't think he really does have to ultimately at all, because I think his in-ring work speaks for itself.
Yeah. And I feel like that is the upside of having Neville lose these matches is you're establishing him towards the upper portion of the card by putting him in the ring with these bigger names like Dolph Ziggler, like a Seth Rollins, but by having him lose, you're not having it come off as so forced of a push. Mm-hmm. You're not shoving him down the fans' throats. And I do feel like the ring work backs him up. Like, there was a really impressive spot in this match where he did the little balancing act along the barricade and then hit a 450 splash right off the barricade, which is only about as high off the floor as the ring apron is. Mm. That was really impressive. I was surprised by that.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool. But Sheamus interferes at the end of the match and attacks both of them, but I think it was mostly focused on Ziggler, which could foreshadow a feud possibly there. It's hard really to tell after this kind of episode, but it's hard to tell if any of it's even going to go anywhere, really. So I really don't want to make any predictions because I'm going to sound like an idiot if I'm wrong, because I most likely will be, considering how this show kind of cadenced at the end.
There's so many half-baked feuds, especially 2 weeks out from a main event pay-per-view, that it's just like, well, what are we watching and why? Like, are we going to get a payoff to anything that we're watching in these little tiny squabbles between, these relative mid-card guys?
I don't know. I just really like, I really like Neville a lot. And I think that there's a good way to push him, and I really hope that Vince McMahon doesn't fuck that up.
Yeah, and I feel like this feud coming from the Sheamus side is pretty problematic, actually, because on this past SmackDown, they had him cutting a promo, him and Barrett, about basically how they're sick of the smaller superstars getting all this spotlight and saying how bigger is better. And then they have Sheamus come out here and just running through Ziggler and Bryan and now Neville, and they're really they're hinting at like their real life perception of like the smaller wrestlers, and they're having Sheamus destroy them, and they're not letting the smaller workers get any comeuppance against Sheamus yet. And having him come back as strongly as they have, they're coming off like they want to push him quite a bit, so they're almost booking themselves into a corner where if you have Sheamus go over it comes off as a burial of the smaller wrestlers, which people are a lot more sensitive to than they used to be. But if you have him lose, it's almost a derailment of the push, and you had him come back this strong for pretty much no reason.
Right.
And that's kind of the cadence that they're coming up against, is they have too many feuds to where they have these big-time returns, but you can't pick which side should come out as being over because they've positioned both of them as, a needs-to-be-over situation.
And listen, and like I said, it's you come off of this WrestleMania, you have so many things up in the air, and I feel like there's so many better ways to go than the ways that they've gone tonight. I thought it was absolutely ridiculous the way they booked this. I mean, considering how many guys, even the guys that lost at WrestleMania, looked good. So how do you set up these kind of feuds and think it's going to go over?
You can't have 30 over guys with no guys getting buried, because that doesn't help any feud at all. I mean, look at Ambrose in the past year, where his main job was to put over the guys who needed that kind of bump. And all they've done is put those guys up a notch. But at the same time, Ambrose, who, if you're looking at it from a technicality standpoint, should be a lot lower than he is, but he comes out to gigantic pops every week. So whatever they're trying to do isn't working when they're trying to put one guy over another.
But I think that no matter if a guy does get buried or not, I mean, look at Bray Wyatt as an example. The guy has lost how many feuds? And they just act like it never happened. So there is a way to bring these guys back from the dead, in a sense, even if they do lose in a big feud. And I think that they don't utilize that enough. I mean, the fans aren't going to forget about you if you do lose in a big feud.
But they will forget about you if you don't have anything to do moving forwards.
Right, but the thing is, like I said, the roster is big enough for that kind of thing. And if they would push some of their guys that are lower on the card, they have unlimited possibilities. They really do.
And the main issue is you can do that feasibly, but when you take, 30 to 45 minutes of both shows and give it to Kane and the Big Show, you totally ruin the chance of those other guys getting an exposure to build a rivalry with guys who need to be there who don't need a battle. All of a sudden, you effectively wasted all of your airtime.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the thing that they're running into. I mean, we've said it a bunch of times, is that they have to stretch it out, but you don't have to stretch it out this much. There's too much padding in these shows, I think. But essentially all that happened at the end was Orton and Rollins both have their stipulations that they can basically just come up with on their own. Rollins decides that Orton can't use an RKO at Extreme Rules, and Orton decides that it's going to be a cage match. So basically he's kind of trying to eliminate the Authority and kind of have Rollins one-on-one. So I think it's an interesting prospect because, you can't use your number one move that everybody's really... The reason that you're watching an Orton match is for that RKO. And, you're eliminating the Authority, which does give you... it makes me want to watch it, in a sense, because it's just going to let Seth Rollins display what he can do in the ring.
I think if we're looking at this match, 2 weeks out, I really think it's going to come down to Randy Orton busting out the punt, just based on the fact that it's, a mimic of the Seth Rollins maneuver, and it's his old, finisher that they've kind of gotten rid of in favor of the RKO.
A super finisher, really.
Uh-huh.
Well, yeah, it's just like the curb stomp. It's the go to sleep of maneuvers.
All right, so what do you think on a scale of 1 to 10? How do you rate this Raw?
I think on a scale of RKO out of nowhere, I think it was an 8 out of the stupid scale. And I think it was probably a 3 or 4 out of a build a storyline moving forwards RKO scale, because we saw a lot of stuff we didn't expect, but we didn't expect it for all the wrong reasons, and that ruined the show overall.
I would say I have to agree. I thought it was really... I just was baffled by the way it was booked. And I guess it makes it a little bit interesting going forward, but just not in the right way. Like you said, it's just I feel like things were thrown together in the wrong ways.
Yeah, I tend to think it was really poorly done in terms of moving the storylines forward. I think the storylines that were moving forward a little bit more crisply actually maybe got neglected more so than just some of the feuds that were floundering, but all in all, not very many good matches, not a lot of storyline development, not much logical moving forward at all. I'd have to give this show a 3 out of 10 overall at the very best.
Yeah.
That's a sad place to be in. 2 weeks out of WrestleMania.
All right, so kind of a shitty way to start off a new season, but we're gonna try and be as consistent as we can be. Like we said, when WrestleMania comes around, we'll start a new season. We'll probably have another WrestleMania special, and we also mentioned earlier that we're gonna try and branch out into other branches of wrestling. TNA possibly. I'll probably watch TNA. I don't know if you guys are going to want to do that or not, but
I'm down.
We'll watch Lucha Underground a little bit more.
I want to say next week I want to have 10-15 minutes about this past week's Lucha Underground, so watch it.
All right. I think that's a good idea to we can split up the show into certain segments about each promotion.
Because I think this coming week is the Trios Championship, right, Bill?
Oh, yep.
So I think that'd be a good way to kick off a Lucha Underground special, is talking about their Trios Championship, because they've had some amazing teams that have gotten downridden. I think Big Rick and those guys are the only team left that I remember. I can't remember who they're going to go against, but
I'll say it's Angelico, Son of Havoc, and Evil East, which is really, almost comes off as like 3 characters you'd put together in a sitcom, really.
Yeah, because Evil East and Son of Havoc are an ex-couple, and then you have Angelico, who is like the token pretty white boy, high flyer kind of guy, who might be dating Evil East. I don't know. That storyline is weird.
And he's coming off a series of matches, if I remember right, with Son of Havoc, so there's that dynamic too. It's just really interesting dynamics they have going on between their characters, which is the exact thing you see WWE lacking so badly.
Yeah, they have like the same 30 guys, but some of them are in like 2 to 3 different feuds at the same time, so you kind of have to figure out what's going on, whereas WWE guys are in like half feuds all the time, and you don't know what side to pull for.
Yeah.
All right, guys, thank you for being here. If you're still listening, thank you very much. This is like I said, we're gonna try and keep season 2 rolling as much as we can. If you watched all of season 1, thank you as well, because I can't believe you guys are sitting through these long ass podcasts. This one's pretty long. I was surprised how long we were able to rant about this one. But follow us on Twitter at @SCirclePodcast. Like us on Facebook, and we'll see you next time.